One of the big complaints people often made about Season 1 and now Season 2 of The Last of Us was that Ellie is too annoying, obnoxious, arrogant, whiny. I'm sure you've heard these complaints, you may even agree with them. And to an extent, I think that is fair, no matter how snappy the title of this video might be.
One of my initial gripes were the clumsy attempts to make her a strong, empowered girl boss right off the bat, instead of earning that kind of development later, and the general unsuitability of the actress playing her.
I wanted to show you more examples of this general opinion because I think there is a valid point somewhere here that we can build out of, but it's also very hard to find examples of these kind of complaints that aren't also getting lost down a rabbit hole of shouting woke, or a lot of them accusing Bella Ramsey of being ugly, and I don't like that at all. Those are points that really undermine the criticism I want to pick apart. Even quoting the critical drinker as an example feels like a very straw man thing for me to do. He was just the most prominent example I could think of.
She always seemed to be the one in charge of every conversation, able to win every argument, cope with things that others couldn't, and telling Joel when it was time to move out like she was the real leader of the expedition. It was annoying because the desire to make her Joel's equal the moment they meet each other ultimately undercut the shift in dynamics that happens later in the story.
And, you know, I had thoughts on this general complaint at the time, but I never got around to making a video about it, and currently at the time of recording this, episode 1 of season 2 has been out a few days. I don't know when I'll be able to release this video, maybe something happens in episode 2 that completely undercuts it, but I think there have been even more complaints now about Ellie.
At least in this first episode, she still comes across as this obnoxious teenager who's always like disobeying orders and arguing with people. And
there's similar examples in my own comment section now, and I wanted to talk about it because I think this criticism is wrong. I think it's worth picking apart. I might also be the only person in the world who finds Ellie really sweet rather than irritating. I very much know my opinion is the minority there, but hear me out on this one, okay? Let's start with season 1 and what I think is the obvious point first. Firstly, it's to say, yes, technically Ellie is annoying. Ellie does try to win every argument and very often does succeed. She does grate on Joel. She does complain about things and criticise and disobey orders. She's also often quite stupid in some of her decisions, or naive, or overly confident. What other words would people use? You know, defiant, disobedient. Yeah, I think all of that is kind of true, but crucially, that's also very, very accurate to what a teenager can be. I'm a children's therapist, and even before that I worked in schools, and speaking of all of the teenagers that I've ever worked with, yeah, Ellie is a very, very good depiction of what a teenager is like. The show takes that idea and dumps her into the middle of an apocalypse, and that's a very engaging premise for a show. Secondly, Ellie from the game has a lot of those traits too. In fact, she displays all of them at times, all of this same stuff, but she's also a cleaner depiction. A very squeaky clean idea of a brash, tetchy kid who will disobey in certain cutscenes or at story essential moments, and she'll annoy the hell out of Bill in particular to motivate Joel to defend her, but most of the time she will obey orders, not get in the way, not shoot down what you're doing, and that's because the Last of Us game is a video game. It would be very hard to just play the game if Ellie kept sabotaging or redirecting everything you did, questioning your every decision as Joel. Generally she'll make a few quips, but not too many, because your focus is on looking for supplies, navigating the environment. She'll occasionally chuck a bottle or shoot a little bit in combat, shout at an NPC, but otherwise avoid obstructing your gameplay. There's a lot of great dialogue in the game The Last of Us, but if there was too much of Ellie just saying things while you travel around the world, it would get very distracting. That's not the focus of the game, you know, it's not the core mechanic anyway. Whereas in a TV show, dialogue is very much the focus, or the character development and those kind of discussions. So you do get more of them, and Ellie is less squeaky clean as a result. I think a cleaner Ellie works great for a game, but it does also make for a less realistic and less fleshed out depiction of what her character, I think, is supposed to be at heart. They wanted her to be this difficult, tetchy kid, and TV Ellie is spot on in that, because this is a medium that allows her to be spot on. Which is also one reason, like, for good or bad, it depends what you feel about that episode, but one reason you can get away with cutting all of the scenes between Ellie and Bill that you had in the game. There, you needed Bill to be the one getting annoyed as this outside party, so that we can see all of Ellie's most thorny sides without it obstructing the game too much, but in the show, no, you can just cut out the middleman. You can let Joel be the central focus throughout, him experience her thorny side. And I think this is an important distinction when people complain she's not like the game, she's ruined the character. No, this is what the character was always supposed to be. It's the same basic core, they're just now able to depict her more successfully. That isn't a betrayal of game Ellie at all. And, you know, if you want your drama about a zombie apocalypse to be a realistic one, then the characters have to be realistic first and foremost, and I think they do that with Ellie. But okay, that's not a good enough argument on its own. I also want to point out another important distinction that quotes like these ones I think fail to realise.
She always seemed to be the one in charge of every conversation, able to win every argument.
Just because she does a thing doesn't mean we're supposed to see it as good or right. Ellie winning every argument. The writers aren't wanting us to think, wow, Ellie, you're such a witty hero. No, I think we're supposed to think, God damn, why are teenagers like this? This is why those arguments about girl boss and woke are so weak in terms of this, because they're refusing to engage with the story and the character we're given. We're not supposed to see a girl boss, not to say we're never supposed to think positively about Ellie, there's a lot of great things to her, but we're also supposed to see someone who is invested in needing to win arguments, needing to question and to criticise and rebel. And what do we make of that kind of person? Ellie is meant to be seen as flawed and insecure and difficult and annoying and goddamn, can't you just do what I say for once? I find it a lot easier to empathise with show Joel than game Joel, because in the game he is just a bit of a dick to Ellie from the very beginning. We accept that because A, we are that player and we are just wanting to get on with the game, and B, we understand why. Joel lost Sarah, we get why he doesn't want to be close to Ellie. But in the show, it's also not just that. There's also some more genuine understanding that Joel finds Ellie very annoying. We can see why, it makes more sense. They do rub at each other much more, and that makes for fun comedy, I think, a lot of the time. I like that. I think the problem here is a lot of media has taught people that when a character does something that's not necessarily bad, but not like a really good thing, that they're supposed to at some point get shot down for it. They're supposed to have a comeuppance or having a wise figure tell them how it really is type moment. And so when we don't get that, people conclude, oh, that must mean they think Ellie was right about everything, we're supposed to think positively about everything she does. And I think that's just a weak interpretation to be making of this show. I think we're supposed to feel something else in regards to Ellie, the same thing Joel starts to feel.
I'll just come back another day.
Should I say it out loud? Yeah, I should. I'm scared, though. I'm scared to say it, which is why I have to.
I have 51% off World Anvil. They are sponsoring this video. They are offering you 51% off, and they are an online tool for building worlds, you may have guessed. But also creating characters, designing and managing campaigns for all sorts of different games. My best friend uses it for D&D, but there's lots of other games. You can use it for planning your stories, writing your stories, working on all sorts of creative projects. For me, it is my novel. I need a tool like this, otherwise I am far too chaotic. We're moving flat soon, and I literally have 6 cardboard boxes full of random sheets of A4 paper I've written old ideas on. Pre-World Anviled me was a nightmare. So with something like this, not only can I keep everything organised, keep it all in one place, be able to easily edit things, but I can create timelines, I can create hyperlinks branching off specific characters or articles or a billion other things that just make it so much easier to find stuff. Planning things can be hard, especially when there's so much to do, but having all of these tools to help visualize it, to help split everything down into specific points, articles one at a time, it helps immensely. I'm not going to show you because it's a secret, but I've created different bio pages for all of the characters in my world, even the minor ones, which house they live in, what their job is, who they're friends with, who they hate, what different beliefs they have or opinions about events that go on in a book or whatever. So, World Anvil is great. I hope you can hear my passion, and if you desire, if you crave. If you call to the heavens for a 51% discount, then use the code TREE, or click the link in the description, or the pinned comment, or if you just want to try out the free version, then go for that. You know, there's no time limit on it. Test it out for as long as you want. World Anvil. We could talk a lot about why it's very important for teenagers to increasingly question all of the things they previously took for granted as children, and to suddenly become very opinionated and to test out rebelling and undermining authority, to get to feel like the smart one for a change, you know? All of that stuff is natural and, to an extent, an important part of developing a more rounded sense of independence. It isn't pleasant and it isn't exactly correct, but it is a first step to discovering more of a middle ground later. In all of it though, if you look, you can see some of the insecurities. The eagerness to prove themselves, to try and feel smart and capable, to absolutely revel in any victory, to get defensive over mistakes, to rip into everything you say. I've worked with kids who will completely run rings around me, have a comeback for everything, lightning quick, and they always win that game. Always, because they're very eager to win that game. My primary motive in conversation isn't to outshine them or to win an argument or to score points, because I'm older and more secure in myself and there's other things I'm trying to do. They are not. It's what they do. There can be a fantasy or a desire, I think, in culture and society to sit down these kind of difficult kids. The Dr. Phil approach to children where you tell them off and you tell them what's wrong and they go, "Oh boy, thank you so much for your wisdom, sir." Joel tries a few times to kind of do something like that with Ellie, but it really does not work. Not to say it's an inherently flawed thing to do. There are obviously times you do have to talk to a child and explain things to them. But do you know how easy therapy would be if I could just give them a lecture? How easy teaching would be. You try that and their defensiveness will shoot through the roof and they will argue like hell. You got to find the goodness within them, as Joel does. The very things that most annoyed him about Ellie start to become the most endearing, and that's when she really dares to be vulnerable with him. That's when she really dares to let him be a proper protector, crucially happening while she's also becoming more mature and more able to take some of the weight. I say protector, we're going to come back to that word later. Also, sure, it would be smart for Ellie to just trust this old experienced Joel and do what he says, and that will keep her safe. But does she know she can trust him? Why should she trust a guy she doesn't really know anything about at the beginning, who doesn't even like her? Part of her needle is testing to figure out if she can rely on him. And even more so, Joel then does prove to be flawed and human, a point that doesn't work quite the same in the game, because as Joel there you're charging about mowing down endless people. He doesn't do that in TV. I think it would get very repetitive. It wouldn't come across as realistic. Instead, Joel is less superhuman, until the bit with the fireflies, I guess. He's too old,
Too slow, and too fucking deaf.
to be the superhuman in the show, and therefore it is not a bad idea for Ellie to keep trying to strike out her independence. All of the annoyingness is very sweet when you look deeper and you see where it comes from, in my opinion. Try to stamp it out and you will end up bitter and disappointed and like Richard Vernon from The Breakfast Club.
And each year, these kids get more and more arrogant.
Come on, Vern. The kids haven't changed. You have.
Try to nurture the parts that are good within it in order that they can grow out of the rest, though. There's a thought. Another quick point before we take things further. Can I also just say trauma? Joel has experienced trauma and it makes him cold and grouchy and a bit horrible to Ellie at times. We understand that, we forgive him. Ellie has experienced trauma and it makes her very eager to appear dependent, to appear strong. I think there's a void she can fall into at times, to be defensive and gobby as hell, but also sometimes hopelessly, childishly idealistic, making for what is perhaps my favourite character moment of the season, Ellie wishfully thinking she can save Sam with her blood, and then that horrible whimper when he is killed. And then when you factor in Riley's death too, there is so much survivor's guilt here. So much. Kids with trauma are often dismissed and vilified by society, just brushed aside as irritating troublemakers. Get rid of them, they're defiant. Send them to the ranch, threaten them with prison. I recently talked about it in a Patreon article, the example of the Tracy Beaker show and books, just how gobby and aggressive she was, and yeah, that's how it can be. It's not exactly pleasant, but we often understand trauma with cold, overly aggressive or protector father-like figures. But when a kid is struggling with trauma and it leads to difficult behaviours, we just hate them for it? Huh? Survivor's guilt is one part of Ellie's motivations to want to create this cure. Obviously there's more we could discuss, but to become increasingly eager and desperate to do so. And she's on her way there, and then she's being prepped for surgery, and then suddenly she wakes up in a car miles away, and Joel tells her it didn't work. And she wants to believe him about that, but can she? Let's discuss Season 2. So Ellie is 19 now, and she's just as needling, just as rebellious, just as keen to show people up and have the last word and act with incredible recklessness. In fact, I'd say all of these traits are even more so than season 1. 2 points. Firstly, 19 is not too old to be doing that. At 19, you're not magically an adult. I cannot tell you how gobby and opinionated and contrarian I was at that age. About absolutely everything, even things I had no knowledge on. And I thought I was an adult. I felt so very grown up, but you look back, and I look at 19-year-olds now, and I see they're half adult, but also still very teenagery as well. And before we discuss her actual character here, why again do people keep assuming we're meant to think positively on this, that we're meant to go, oh wow, look at Ellie go, she's such a hero, such a leader, she is absolutely bossing it. No, she's obviously not. We're not supposed to think that. The very first scene with Ellie tells us exactly this. Here she is not just showing up this guy in a fight, but very eager to showing up, very eager to gloat about it.
Boom, motherfucker.
Before she then learns he was going easy on her. He pulled his punch and potentially went easy in other ways during this fight too. What does that tell us? Ellie is not as brilliant as she is desperate to prove herself. And similarly, she goes off on her own flaunting all the rules because she wants to feel like Curtis and Viper, which, by the way, is not a compliment when she's twice compared to Curtis and Viper. Are we really supposed to take that as, oh, you're so cool, Ellie? No, they are taking the piss out of her. She goes in, eager to prove how masterful she is, eager to not just leave it to the men, I think is the phrase she uses, but this means Joel, really, symbolically proving she doesn't need him as a protector anymore. She goes in, eager to prove, and she falls through a floor and gets bitten by an infected. The story is very, very clear on what we're supposed to think of Ellie's behaviour here. It's not positive. Plus, the earlier warning about the fact people look up to her.
The others look up to you too. For some fucking reason.
You know, for various reasons we could get into, people do seem to look up to Ellie. I think Ellie could be capable of growing into a leader, only she doesn't take that responsibility at all seriously. She led Dina astray here. This isn't good. It's okay for Ellie to get bitten because she's immune. But what if that was Dina? What if she had fallen through the floor and gotten bitten by an infected because she was following Ellie's recklessness? This is all very, very dangerous. On the surface, she's getting away with it. Why? Well, one, because she's very good at needling people until they give in because she's just so damn exhausting it's easier to give up. Secondly, she is Joel's responsibility to rein in. Is he doing that? No, because their relationship has completely broken down and he's lost sight of what to do. Joel did a thing she would be angry about. Joel took away all her agency in a moment of overprotectiveness that rid humanity of a potential cure. A cure, a thing her own guilt left her very motivated to achieve. Of course, if Joel explained exactly what happened and why he did what he did and why Marlene was also equally flawed, she might be able to understand, or at least begin to start understanding. But he hasn't explained. All she knows is what felt like her big purpose in life, producing a cure. Suddenly that purpose is gone. She was getting prepped for surgery and then suddenly she's in the back of the car and being told it didn't work. So she can't understand because nothing is being explained clearly, and she can't be directly angry with him because she doesn't even know the truth. She's suspicious he's lying, but also afraid to find out, and so now her anger is all stuck. I said in my video on episode 1, Gale represents exactly what Ellie needs to tell Joel. I hate what you did. Now that I've said it, we can start to heal. But Ellie can't say that because she doesn't know for certain, and so they just shuffle about in silence while this half-buried anger instead comes out in less healthy, more chaotic and indirect ways, such as deliberately rebelling against anyone Joel has given instructions to, deliberately not wanting punches pulled, deliberately convincing Tommy to put her on a raid, deliberately behaving in ways she accuses Tommy and Joel of doing in the past. Joel is unable to rein in any of this behaviour because he feels guilty and afraid of confronting her, and so all of it runs wild, and it's a big problem. A conflict I find super interesting. You know, why just dismiss her as annoying and say it's bad than actually engage with what's really interesting here? And let's factor in this question. Why else might Ellie want to keep running into danger rather than letting proper patrols deal with it? She's immune. Better risk her getting bits than someone who would actually turn from the bite, right? Is that not also a way to make up for this heavy feeling of guilt she's been carrying? If I couldn't be the cure, I'll have to be the hero. Desperately want to be that, but there's so much tragic, naive, wishful desperation behind her attempt. attempt. It's not actually at all heroic, her running in like this. It's kind of painful. There's potentially also an aspect of self-punishment to this as well, thinly disguised behind a layer of adrenaline-fueled prowess. Ellie is not doing okay, guys. Ellie is hurting. And it's difficult to express why I find all of this so sweet, but I think about Joel in the same way. Mr. Old, grouchy, grumbling, grumpy Joel with a short fuse. There is something oddly endearing about that, right? I think most people find Joel endearing, and not just despite, but partly because some of those negative traits. Plus the empathy we have to understand beneath, he is really struggling. Why is that same approach not also applied to Ellie, to see the positive in seemingly negative traits and to feel empathy for why it occurs? Which is where we come to the big point. All of this stuff, the needle, the tetchiness, but also the naivety, and perhaps at a stretch we can say the eagerness to not take things too seriously, to suppress the real weight and the reality and the horror of what she's experiencing here. There are times in season 1 where this stuff was stripped away. Particularly after Sam's death, Ellie appeared hollow and broken, and was that good? Was that better? She's a kid with innocence to a degree, and curiosity and joy and whatever other words you want to use. Is that not half of why Joel wants to protect her, why he feels she's worth saving? I think this is the real thematic heart of the moral dilemma at the end of season 1. Sacrifice Ellie to produce a cure that would save lives, or save Ellie for what she symbolises? A soul, a new generation, a new heart blooming out of this apocalyptic winter. Thematically, this is either save lives literally, or save what gives life meaning. And so, if we'd come into season 2 and all of this stuff was gone from Ellie in place of a quiet, serious, very Joel-like Ellie, I'd feel like, well, what the hell did he even save then? How did she change this much? It feels jarring. No, I think it's good to see all of this stuff still present in Ellie, even if it is running her into danger and creating problems that need checking. If something were to later happen that stripped a lot of this stuff away, that left her hollow again, well, yeah, that would be story. That would be awful, gripping tragedy. Not that we're there yet. If ever. I don't know the second game. I've deliberately avoided knowing the second game. Kids, even 19-year-olds, yes, can be very, very difficult, but if they were super easy, goddamn, you would miss it. Goddamn, something very important would be missing. Part of what was so wonderful was that in spite of absolutely everything, that a kid can still be capable of mostly preserving her kiddishness, still being an ordinary kid, that she can get to Jackson with enough of that still intact. For now, I really hope that doesn't change, but if it does, it will hopefully feel like an understandable progression in her arc, rather than something that just happened off screen as a result of a time jump. So, in answer to all of the complaints, yes, Ellie is annoying. Should we complain about that? Should we hate her characterization for that? No. No, we definitely shouldn't. It's realistic, it's meaningful, it works. Should we hate it if it's different to what the game did? I mean, I don't know. That's an obvious weakness in this video, that I don't know the game. And I think that is a valid opinion, to dislike how it's different. Maybe the game does do it in a different, even perhaps more effective way. But adaptations are meant to be different, aren't they? They're meant to try and do something slightly different. And whether this version is better or worse, it's definitely still successful in what it's doing. It's very well written, and I would say very well performed. I do think Bella Ramsey is great in the parts. They are also not ugly, and I also don't care if they look young. Lots of 19-year-olds do, and that strengthens the tragic sense I have that Ellie is still a child here struggling. Someone with the absolute weight of the world trying her best to carry it like an adult, but also still very young, and not half as capable as she's attempting to be. Ellie may not need Joel's protection, but she certainly needs his care and support and nurturing. And it's tragic she's not getting that right now. But what's your thoughts? Do you think I'm an idiot? Comments, all sorts. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, maybe even support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Ben Ree, Joshua C. Follier, and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.